Dear viewers, today we're going to do an extreme thought experiment. If you were sent back to medieval Europe in 1339, with no swords chasing you, no famine besieging the city, how long could you survive? The answer is, more likely than not, you won't even make it through a full 24 hours. What kills you won't be a knight's lance, nor a lord's taxes. It will be the one thing you do every single day, using the toilet. It will be every breath you take, every step you take on the ground, every sip of water you drink, all saturated with deadly filth that can overwhelm your modern immune system in an instant. Today, we're not talking about knightly legends or fairy tales of princesses. We're going to follow Pierre, a shoemaker in Paris, through an entire day in 1339, and see for ourselves that the era romanticized by countless works of art is, in essence, a living hell wrapped in feces, garbage, plague, and death. First, let's introduce our protagonist, Pierre, 35 years old, a handmade shoemaker in the Saint-Antoine district of Paris. In that era, he was already among the long-lived. The average life expectancy in 14th century Europe was less than 30 years, and more than half of all children did not live to see their 5th birthday. He lives with his wife and 2 children in a 2-story half-timbered house, with his workshop on the ground floor and the family's bedroom on the second. This is the most typical working-class home in 1339 Paris. The second floor juts out a full meter beyond the first, overhanging the narrow street below to claim a little extra space. Every house on the street is built this way, so even at noon, the street sees little sunlight, forever dim, damp, and permeated with an inescapable stench. Our story begins at 3:47 in the morning. 3:47 a.m. Nighttime urination. A puddle of urine poured over the entire city. Pierre wakes up with a full bladder. There were no electric lights or nightlife in the Middle Ages. Ordinary people went to bed as soon as it got dark, and waking up in the middle of the night to pee was a common occurrence. He fumbles around in the pitch black, next to the huddled bodies of his family, on a mattress of straw wrapped in ragged linen, teeming with countless fleas, lice, and bedbugs. He's already woken up 3 or 4 times that night from the bites, his body covered in red, swollen, itchy welts, but he's long been used to it. No one in Europe, from kings to beggars, could escape these parasites. He finally finds the chamber pot at the foot of the bed. It's a crude earthenware jar, its rim caked with thick, yellow-black urine scale, still holding residue from the night before. The acrid stench has been trapped in the closed bedroom all night, hitting him the moment he picks it up. But Pierre doesn't even flinch. Right there, next to the bed, in front of his entire family, he relieves himself into the chamber pot. You might ask, why didn't he go to the toilet? The answer is simple. His home has no toilet. In 1339 Europe, private toilets were extremely rare, even in noble castles, let alone in the homes of commoners. The flush toilet was an invention more than 400 years in the future. In the Middle Ages, the very concept of a plumbing system did not exist. For the working people of Paris, the only toileting tool in the home was this earthenware chamber pot. After finishing, Pierre does something completely normal for the time, but unthinkable to us today. He walks to the bedroom window, pushes open the drafty wooden shutters, doesn't even glance at the street below, and pours the entire contents of the chamber pot, urine and feces alike, splashing straight down onto the street with a loud slosh. You heard that right. Straight out the second-floor window onto the street. In fact, as early as 1270, the Paris City Hall had issued a decree. Anyone dumping feces or sewage from a window must shout 3 times, "Attention! Water coming!" to give pedestrians below time to get out of the way or face a fine. But this decree was little more than a scrap of paper in 1339 Paris. The street was empty in the early hours of the morning. and no one was willing to stand in the freezing wind and yell 3 times into the dark. Almost everyone in Paris did exactly what Pierre did, tipped it out the window, no matter who might be below. This meant that every single morning, every street in Paris was soaked through with feces, urine, and sewage dumped from thousands of homes. Pierre sets the empty chamber pot back down at the foot of the bed, with no intention of cleaning it. For one thing, clean water was an extremely precious resource in medieval Paris, bought from water sellers, and no one would waste it washing a chamber pot. For another, people at the time had no concept of hygiene or killing bacteria. They believed something was clean as long as they couldn't see the dirt. The pores of the earthenware pot were already filled with E. coli, Salmonella, and all kinds of deadly pathogens. And this jar sat right next to their bed every single day, 6:12 a.m., heading out, walking through ankle-deep fecal sludge, drinking contaminated water as dawn breaks. Pierre gets up and heads out to his workshop. The first hurdle he faces the moment he opens his front door is the street beneath his feet. 90% of the streets in 1339 Paris were unpaved dirt roads. After a full night of fecal dumping from thousands of homes, plus the early morning dew, the entire street had turned into a thick, dark brown sludge the Parisians called black sludge. It was no ordinary mud. It was a never-drying, foul mixture of feces, urine, rotting vegetable scraps, animal carcasses, horse manure, blood, and offal from the slaughterhouses. At its shallowest, the sludge came up to your ankles. At its deepest, it could reach your knees. Pierre had put on his thickest wooden clogs, with soles nearly 10 centimeters high, specifically to walk through the fecal sludge without getting it in his shoes. Even so, with every step, he could feel the sludge seeping through the gaps in the clogs, sticking slimly to his feet. Walking down the street, feces left by people relieving themselves in the night littered the corners of the walls. Herds of pigs and stray dogs roamed the streets, rooting through the garbage and feces in the sludge. These free-roaming pigs were the sanitation workers of medieval Paris. There was also countless horse manure. Paris was home to tens of thousands of horses, each producing more than 10 pounds of feces a day, all dropped directly onto the street, crushed into a pulp by carriage wheels, and mixed into the black sludge. Some of you may ask, didn't the Romans have an advanced sewer system? Why didn't medieval Europeans keep using it? It's not that they didn't want to. They simply couldn't. Medieval European cities did have sewer systems, but they were all relics left by the Roman Empire, long since defunct. In the 1st century AD, the Romans built magnificent underground sewers, most famously the Cloaca Maxima in Rome, a stone channel large enough for a horse-drawn cart to pass through, designed to smoothly drain the city's sewage into the Tiber River. But by 1339, these 1,000-year-old structures had long since collapsed, become clogged, and fallen into ruin amid war and the passage of time. After the fall of the Western Roman Empire, Europe descended into centuries of fragmentation and unrest. The city authorities of the time couldn't even manage regular street cleaning, let alone maintain such a vast and complex underground system. The once glorious Roman sewers were either filled in and used as building foundations, or blocked up into giant underground cesspits, completely stripped of their drainage function. Without the Roman underground sewers, the medieval city's drainage design was nothing short of absurd. The entire city streets were themselves part of the sewer. Most city streets of the time were built with an arched crown, higher in the middle and lower on both sides, with shallow open ditches dug along the edges. This was the only official drainage system in the entire city. By design, rainwater was supposed to carry sewage, feces, and garbage down the slope of the street into the ditches on either side, and then into the river on the edge of the city. But the reality was that these ditches had no functional outlet, were almost never cleaned, and were perpetually half-clogged. Feces and garbage washed into them quickly blocked the channels entirely, and the waste inside accumulated and fermented into stagnant black pools of fecal water. For families with a small backyard, there was another option for waste disposal: digging a deep cesspit several meters down in the yard, where all the chamber pot contents, excrement, and sewage from the house were dumped. But these cesspits never had any waterproof lining or seepage control. The waste in the pit would slowly leach into the soil, directly contaminating the city's entire groundwater layer. When the cesspit filled up, the homeowner had to pay for gongfarmer, or gong farmers, to empty it, the highest paid yet most disgusting and dangerous job in medieval Europe. The Paris City Hall mandated that gong farmers could only work at night. They had to climb down into meters-deep cesspits of fermenting feces, scoop out the waste, and haul it outside the city. The methane and hydrogen sulfide building up in the pits could knock a person unconscious in an instant, and any pathogen in the feces that touched an open wound could cause a fatal infection. Even so, many gong farmers, to save themselves the trouble, would secretly dump entire cartloads of feces into the Seine in the middle of the night or at the base of the Paris city walls. By the mid-14th century, the mounds of feces outside the Paris walls reached over 6 meters high at their tallest, level with the walls themselves. Later, during the 100 Years' War, English troops attacking Paris climbed the city walls by stepping on these very mounds of feces. The drinking water for Parisians was an even deadlier trap. The entire city had only 12 public wells, and the closest cesspits were less than 5 meters away from the wells. The well water was already heavily contaminated with fecal sewage. The Seine, treated as the largest open-air toilet in the city, had the royal palace and noble districts dumping their sewage upstream, while commoners drew their drinking water downstream. They dumped feces upstream, while the poor drank the water downstream. This was the daily reality of Paris in 1339, 1227 p.m., using the toilet, one wrong step, and you're a corpse in the cesspit. After working all morning, Pierre faces the most harrowing moment of his day, walking to the public latrine to defecate. He doesn't do it at home because the chamber pot is too small, and emptying it into the backyard cesspit will fill it up quickly, and hiring gong farmers is a significant expense. For this reason, most working Parisians chose to use the public latrines. But how many public latrines were there in 1339 Paris? The answer is fewer than 20. In the largest city in Europe, with a population of over 100,000 people, there were fewer than 20 public latrines, an average of 1 for every 5,000 people. What's more, almost all of these latrines were built on bridges over the Seine. Pierre walks for nearly 20 minutes to reach the nearest latrine on the bridge. It's a row of small stalls separated by wooden planks with no doors, only a tattered cloth for privacy. There's no light inside, pitch black, and the overwhelming stench hits you from more than 10 meters away, enough to make you retch. He pulls back the cloth and steps inside. The wooden floor is slippery, with feces and urine covered in filthy footprints, and one wrong move can send you slipping. Each stall has a rectangular hole cut into the floor, directly above the rushing Seine below. Any feces you pass falls straight through the hole into the river, with no treatment whatsoever. For the few public latrines not built on bridges, Below the holes was a massive, meters-deep cesspit with a floor of old wooden planks, perpetually corroded by feces and extremely prone to breaking. Let me tell you two true stories recorded in the Paris Municipal Archives. In 1326, a Parisian baker named Nicolas Durand went to a public latrine at night. In the dark, the wooden planks beneath his feet suddenly snapped, and he fell straight into the cesspit below, drowning in feces on the spot. Even King Louis IX of France, later canonized as Saint Louis, had a near-death experience in 1238 when the wooden floor of his toilet in the royal palace collapsed. He fell through, and only a crossbeam saved him from plunging into the feces-filled cesspit below. It wasn't just common Parisians. Nobles and kings in castles had it barely any better. The toilets in medieval castles, called garderobes, were mostly built projecting out from the outer walls, with a hole in the floor. Feces fell straight into the castle moat below. Over time, the moat became completely clogged with feces and garbage, turning black and putrid. It was less a defensive fortification than a giant open-air cesspit, yet, ironically, this made it an even more effective barrier. After all, no attacking soldier would willingly wade through waist-deep fecal water to climb the castle walls. Across the English Channel in London, the situation was even worse than in Paris. Londoners dumped all the city's feces and sewage into the river Fleet. Day after day, year after year of dumping caused the river to stop flowing entirely, its channel completely blocked with waste. Eventually, it was filled in entirely, becoming the infamous Fleet Street we know today. The public latrines on London Bridge also dropped their contents straight into the River Thames in what was called aerial bombardment. According to municipal records from the time, more than 2,000 tons of human feces were dumped directly into London's mother river every single year. Just like in Paris, the upper reaches of the Thames were home to the noble districts, while the commoners drew their drinking water downstream. Dumping feces upstream and drinking the water downstream was the standard for nearly every European city of the era. After Pierre finishes his business, the next step is wiping. Toilet paper did not exist in 1339 Europe. While China had dedicated toilet paper as early as the Tang Dynasty, medieval European commoners used hay, moss, leaves from the side of the road, or scraps of rags to wipe themselves. The nobility, at best, used wool or linen. None of these options could clean properly, and fecal residue would remain on clothing and skin, breeding bacteria and causing infections. Worse still, many people didn't wipe at all, just pulled up their pants and left. 341p. M2 late night, daily life in a petri dish. And the truth of why you won't survive. 24 hours Pierre works in his workshop through the afternoon, but he cannot escape the omnipresent filth and deadly risk all around him. His midday meal is a black bread and a small piece of cheese brought by his wife. The black bread is made from coarse rye flour, mixed with sand, bran, and even bugs and rat droppings from the mill. Pierre eats with his bare hands, never washing them before a meal, partly because clean water is too precious, and partly because people at the time had no concept that washing hands before eating could prevent disease. People in medieval Europe didn't just skip hand washing. They almost never bathed at all. The Catholic Church taught its followers that bathing was an act of indulgence that would defile the soul, and that the dirtier your body, the closer you were to God. The dominant medical theory of the time, Galen's theory of humorism, held that bathing would open the pores of your skin, allowing the miasma in the air to enter your body, disrupt your humoral balance, and make you sick. For this reason, the average person in 1339 Europe bathed only 3 times in their entire life: at birth, at their wedding, and after their death. Even nobles were barely better. King Charles V of France, who ruled in the 14th century, bathed only twice in his entire life. Pierre is 35 years old, and the last time he bathed was at his wedding, 10 years prior. His hair is full of head lice, the seams of his clothes teem with body lice, and his bed is infested with fleas and bed bugs. These parasites don't just leave him in constant itching agony. They are vectors for deadly, infectious diseases. The entire city of Paris was one giant, unprotected petri dish for pathogens. Every household dumped their household garbage straight onto the street. Slaughterhouses in the city center dumped blood and offal directly into the river. Dead animals and even stillborn infants were tossed onto the side of the road to rot. The bans issued by Paris City Hall were completely ignored. Even the guards tasked with enforcing the law dumped their own chamber pots out the window every night. In such an environment, plagues and infectious diseases were a constant fact of life. In 1339, there were still exactly 8 years until the Black Death swept across Europe and killed a third of its population. But even before that, Europe was perpetually in the grip of leprosy, smallpox, tuberculosis, typhoid fever, dysentery, and typhus, with outbreaks almost every year. The most common of these, dysentery and typhoid fever, are both classic fecal-oral diseases. Drink water contaminated with feces, eat food touched by unwashed hands, and you will be infected. Once infected, the patient suffers from violent diarrhea, vomiting, and high fever, dying of dehydration within days. There were no antibiotics, no oral rehydration salts in medieval Europe. Contracting these diseases was almost always a death sentence. More than half of all children died before the age of 5 from diarrhea and dysentery caused by drinking unclean water. Europe had already created the perfect breeding ground for the even more horrific Black Death. Feces covered every street. Mountains of garbage lay uncollected. Rats ran rampant. Water sources were heavily contaminated, and there was no public health system, no epidemic prevention capacity whatsoever. The bacterium Yersinia pestis, which causes plague, had already been brought to the Crimean Peninsula by the Mongol armies and would soon reach Italy via merchant ships before spreading across the entire continent. When it arrived, it was like a spark falling into a haystack. Between 1347 and 1351, in just 4 short years, the Black Death killed between 25 and 50 million people across Europe, between a third and a half of the continent's total population at the time. Entire cities were wiped out with not a single living person left on the streets. And the root cause of this catastrophe was the abysmal sanitation conditions of medieval Europe. After dark, Pierre returns home. His dinner is once again black bread with a little boiled beans. After eating, he talks with his family for a few minutes before getting into bed in the dark. Lying there, he is once again kept awake by the bites of fleas. Outside the window, he hears the frequent slosh of chamber pots being dumped from windows and the sound of stray dogs rooting through garbage in the street. The air is forever filled with the inescapable stench of feces, rot, mold, and sweat from his own home. This was Pierre's day, an ordinary day for an ordinary person in medieval Europe. Now we return to the question we asked at the beginning. Why can't a modern person survive even 24 hours in this era? First and foremost, Your immune system cannot withstand it. Your immune system evolved in a modern, clean environment. You've grown up drinking disinfected tap water, eating food that meets hygiene standards, and receiving vaccinations against countless diseases. You have never been exposed to the deadly pathogens that were everywhere in the Middle Ages. Take just one sip of well water from that era, and the Vibrio cholerae, Salmonella typhi, and other pathogens inside will cause violent vomiting and diarrhea within hours, leading to severe dehydration. Without immediate medical treatment, you will be dead within 24 hours. Even if you don't drink the water, a single blister on your foot, broken open and exposed to the fecal sludge, can lead to sepsis or tetanus, killing you within days. A single bite from a flea or louse can infect you with typhus or even the plague, with a mortality rate of over 50%. Second, your mind and body simply cannot endure such an environment. You are used to flush toilets, clean toilet paper, daily showers, and air free of overwhelming stench. In the Middle Ages, everywhere you go is a stench so foul it makes you retch. There is nowhere clean to use the toilet, no way to bathe, no way to change into clean clothes. Parasites will bite you all over, keeping you awake all night, unable to eat. Within a single day, your mind will break first. Not to mention the constant risk of accidents. Walking down the street and having a pot of feces dumped on your head from above, stepping on a rotten plank in a latrine and falling into a cesspit to drown, slipping and falling into a ditch full of fecal sewage. Many people romanticize medieval Europe, imagining it as an era of knights, castles, and romantic fairy tales. But what we've told you today is the true face of the Middle Ages. It was a hell submerged in feces, a place of death where the average person didn't live to see 30. The flush toilets, clean tap water, and comprehensive sewer systems we take for granted today did not appear out of nowhere. They were built by humanity over hundreds of years at the cost of tens of millions of lives. These things are the true, solid foundation of modern civilization. Without them, so-called civilization is nothing more than a castle in the air, built on a mountain of feces.